Inglourious Basterds challenges films of a similar genre. The main trailer promised an action-packed military thriller in which a squad of American Jews exterminates Nazis. However, in reality, the movie was about something else. There is barely 15 minutes of shooting, and the remaining 2 hours are occupied by tense, dramatic dialogue. This movie makes fun of action movies and demonstrates how silly the usual cliches look. Most action movies share a common rule: the main character must be stronger and smarter than everyone else. We admire him. We want to be like him. In such movies, the secret agent always successfully infiltrates into the ranks of villains, learns their plans, circles everyone, and foils any conspiracy. He is the initiator and driving force of the plot. In Inglourious Basterds, it's the opposite. The villain here is smarter than any of the heroes. Cheap tricks like cross-dressing, which usually work in other movies, don't fool anyone here. Secret agents are unmasked before they even have a chance to team up, and the good guys were only able to carry out their plans because they were allowed to. From the very beginning of the movie, we see the complete superiority of the antagonists. They control any situation. They cannot be deceived. It starts, of course, with Hans Landa. When Landa arrives at Mr. Lapadite's house, he already knows that he is harboring Jews. Landa loves rumors because facts are easily confused, and rumors, whether true or false, give a man away. He has asked neighbors about Lapadite and his daughters.
Les rumeurs qui circulent dans le village au sujet de votre famille sont tout à fait fondées.
Knows that Lapadite speaks English, knows the names of all the Dreyfus, and may have even seen their family photos. Landa is just toying with Lapadite, enjoying his wit. Tarantino emphasized that Landa doesn't smoke a pipe. He prefers cigarettes, but in this scene, the pipe becomes part of his intellectual game. It's as if he's comparing himself to Sherlock Holmes, revealing, "I know you're lying to me, but you can't fool me that easily." Barely crossing the threshold of the house, he already knows where the Jewish family is.
Les rumeurs qui circulent dans le village au sujet de votre famille sont tout à fait fondées. Puisque nous sommes sur une exploitation laitière, je suppose sans risque de me tromper que vous avez du lait?
Oui.
Alors, je préfère du lait.
Landa is a first-rate manipulator and detective. He is proud of his unofficial title of Jewish Hunter. Despite the fact that he already knows that the Jewish family is hiding under the floor, he sets up the interrogation, claiming that it is a mere formality. This same pattern is repeated in the scene with Shoshana. Landa knows who she is. He knows that the owner of the movie theater has never mentioned his niece. He is aware that Marcel, a black projectionist, works at the theater. Moreover, he realizes that Shoshana is the same girl he let go 4 years ago. Hans Landa adopts his classic bullying style. He orders Shoshana a glass of milk, a clear allusion to the dairy farm where her family died. Landa also drank milk that day. In addition, he orders a strudel with cream. In the first half of the 20th century, strudel was often made with fat instead of butter, especially during wartime. Landa orders her a completely non-kosher dessert that Jews would not eat under normal circumstances. In addition, he asks for cream to be added to the strudel. Jewish culture does not allow meat products to be eaten with dairy products. Moreover, not every Jew would agree to drink milk collected by a non-Jew. Landa thus hints that he has figured out Shoshana. He sees right through her. Shoshana, for her part, eats just one bite of strudel. To tease her further, Hans offers her a cigarette, emphasizing that it is German. He then directs a hard stare at her, as he does at Mr.
Il y avait une
Lapadite.
autre chose que je voulais vous demander. Mais maintenant, sur ma vie, impossible de m'en souvenir. Enfin, bon, ce ne devait pas être important.
Landa lets her go, because at that moment, a plan is already brewing in his head. The events unfold in June 1944. The German High Command already realized that the war was lost. Landa was also well aware of this. To switch sides was the only reasonable option for him. It was profitable for him to gather all the Nazi leadership in one place and let Shoshana destroy them. At the same time, he planned to contact the Americans and British to help them end the war, ensuring a secure future for himself. However, Hans Landa was not going to rely solely on Shoshana. While watching the movie, one wonders how Bridget von Hammersmark knew that Hitler would be present at the gala premiere of Pride of Nation. This information was not announced publicly for security reasons. Only ministers, generals, and Landa himself, who was responsible for the security of the event, were in possession of it. It was Landa who leaked this information so that someone would pass it on to the bastards. He wanted them to know that all the leaders of the Third Reich would gather in one place so that they could then take advantage of the situation as they destroyed the cream of the Aryan nation. It was Landa who benefited most from this plan. Recall the scene in the movie theater. As in the previous 2 interrogations, Hans Landa already knows everything he needs to know. He fools around with the bastards, in complete control of the situation.
Antonio Margareti.
Ancora?
Margareti.
Un'altra volta, ma adesso vorrei proprio sentire la musica delle parole.
It gets particularly awkward when Bridget von Hammersmark tries to justify herself. Hans laughs heartily upon hearing her frankly stupid explanation. The most logical thing to say would be that she broke her leg falling down the stairs. That's exactly what Landa expected. However, von Hammersmark states that she was mountain climbing. From this ridiculous version, Landa could not contain his laughter. He was always one step ahead in every interrogation scene, seeing his opponents through. It is important to note that his interrogations never looked like normal interrogations. They were mind games. In the movie theater episode, Landa already had a fully laid out plan. He had captured Utovich, prepared wine, and 3 glasses for himself. Utovich and rain, and everything he needed to negotiate with the Americans. Even if the bastard operation would fail, he had a backup plan. Shoshana, the British general in the film, claims that the theater operation was the brainchild of Bridget von Hammersmark. In fact, it was the plan of Hans Landa alone. He saw an opportunity and decided to defect to the Americans as he knew the war was almost lost. At the beginning of the movie, Landa is proud of his unofficial title of Hunter of Jews. However, at the end he calls it ridiculous and tries to justify himself by claiming that he was just doing his job. According to him, he is a detective who looks for people, and his work in the SS forced him to look for Jews. Landa is desperate to clear his reputation before being taken to the Americans. But as Utovich emphasizes, the nickname has stuck, and there's no washing it off. Now, consider the scene in the pub. Dieter Hellstrom is trying to find out what the bastards are doing here, and how von Hammersmark is involved. Initially, it may seem that the bastards were given away by the atypical 3-finger gesture of the Germans, as at this point, Hellstrom's facial expression changes dramatically from relaxed to hostile. He points his Walther at Hickox. However, Hellstrom does not say that it was the gesture that gave them away. Only Frau von Hammersmark voiced this assumption. He had figured out the bastards much earlier, as soon as he approached the table. He didn't just suspect. He was sure that he explained all the awkwardness that had prevailed before that very gesture had appeared. Hellstrom calls attention to Hickox's strange accent. The latter, in an attempt to justify his apparent foreign accent, replies that he comes from a village at the foot of Piz Palu, and that everyone speaks that way in those places. Hickox claims that he was in a movie with Leni Riefenstahl, directed by Georg Pabst. He's sure Hellstrom hasn't seen the movie, or at least saw it a long time ago, and vaguely remembers it. But what Hickox certainly couldn't have foreseen was that the film White Hell of Piz Palu was shown at a Shoshana movie theater just yesterday. When Frederick Zoller thanks Shoshana for organizing German movie nights for officers, we can see the poster, Georg Pabst, The White Hell of Piz Palu, starring Leni Riefenstahl. Hellstrom was there, and he remembers this movie very well. Hellstrom has a passion for movies and is excellent at them. Perhaps he, like Hickox, remembers every scene from the movie. Dieter is surprised that Hickox describes the details of the movie so accurately. Lieutenant Hickox was a film critic before the war, even publishing 2 major books on German cinema. Hellstrom suggests that the fake Hauptsturmführer in front of him is the very same British film critic. To be sure, he suggests playing a game of Who Am I? Hickox writes on a playing card the name of the director who made the movie about Pitzpaloo, Georg Pabst. It was about his work that Hickox wrote one of his books, but much more interesting is what Hellstrom wrote for Hickox. Brigitte Horney. This little-known actress only became popular after the 1943 movie Munchausen. The movie was made under the Third Reich, commissioned by Joseph Goebbels, a movie that Hickox could not see due to a lack of German exports.
Yes, obviously I haven't seen any of the films made in the last 3 years.
Hellstrom is running the game. He knows that Hickox is familiar with all the Brigitte Horney films made before the war, but Hickox will not know about Munchausen, made in 1943, a film incredibly famous in Germany and technically revolutionary. If it were Hickox's turn, he would name a whole host of obscure auteur films, but he would not name Munchausen, thus guaranteed to give himself away. If Hellstrom was not sure of Hickox's identity, he recognized Wilhelm Wicke and Hugo Stiglitz quickly, as they are the only German natives in the Bastard squad. Stiglitz is a celebrity in his own right. His picture was printed in the German newspapers, and Hellstrom recognized him without a doubt. Hellstrom knows all the German officers stationed in France. He jokingly adds that only those worth knowing. Sturmbannführer is the rank of deputy head of the Sturmbahn territorial units, and since he is the major in charge of internal security, he must know all the lieutenants and sergeants stationed in Paris. Obviously, he knows that the officers in front of him are not German officers, but members of the Bastard unit. Sergeant Werner Rachtmann said that every soldier in the German army had heard of Hugo Stiglitz. His picture was on the front page of every German newspaper. Obviously, he was the kind of German stationed in France who was worth knowing. In addition, Hans Landa and Hellstrom know that not long ago Stiglitz was freed by the Bastards, among them Wilhelm Wicke. Hellstrom taunts Stiglitz, first patting him down to get him to move, then asking him to write his name on his card for the game. He realizes that the pub is packed with German soldiers, and Stiglitz will not reveal himself. When Hellstrom gets up from the table to take the cards, Hickox signals, he guesses, and Stiglitz also signals, "We're burned." The Sturmbannführer's actions seem simply suicidal, but if you pay attention to what he does, everything falls into place. He tries to get the Bastards drunk, constantly offering toasts, encouraging them to raise their glass, to drink whiskey. Then he proposes a drinking game. He starts the game first. If he wins, the rest of the table must drink. Then he orders them a bottle of excellent whiskey, which is hard to refuse. He himself refuses whiskey, only sipping beer. Hellstrom tries to get drunk and disarm the Bastards to find out what is going on and how the German movie diva is connected with them. So why did he react so strongly to the atypical three-finger gesture? Perhaps he was just frustrated. He, just like Landa, considers such things an insult to their professionalism. The arrogant Hellstrom enjoyed his wit, and when Hickox screwed up so stupidly, Dieter felt insulted. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" That, in turn, was his mistake. He could have just pretended not to notice it. Either way, he got a little too involved, and the situation got out of control. This scene is very similar to a scene in a movie theater. A German officer bullies 3 false officers. Then the German officer also mocks the 3 fake macaroni officers, and in both cases we hear silly excuses. This movie is a critique of movies of this genre. The enemy is shown not as a bunch of goons, but as top-notch specialists of their craft. This movie is about guerrillas and spies, but they are bitten like children in absolutely every episode. This movie is historical, but it is completely untrustworthy. It's a military, patriotic movie, but with the exact opposite perspective. The end of the war was brought about by one of the most brutal German colonels. It is a movie about valiant heroes, but the main characters can hardly be called noble. They cut scalps off ordinary soldiers who act on orders. At the same time, the German soldiers are shown as decent people.
I respectfully refuse, sir.
If we compare Aldo Rain and Hans Landa, they are very similar. Two commanders who claim to have come down from the mountains to take part in the war. Landa was pulled out of the Austrian Alps by Hitler, while Rhine came down from the freaking Smoky Mountains. Both commanders are brutal to the enemy. Both are arrogant. This film is filled with violence, but criticizes violence used in the wrong context. Throughout the movie, we see several scenes in which Aldo Rain's squad pisses off Nazis, and we think these killings are justified. But then we see the Nazis watching the movie Nation's Pride about killing Americans. Also, considering these killings justified, Tarantino emphasizes this connection. In Pride of a Nation, when Private Zoller kills an American soldier, the soldier falls from a window with the famous Wilhelm scream. The crowd enjoys the spectacle. As the mess begins, we see a German falling out of a window with much the same scream. The spectacle is enjoyed by us. We are watching a movie that kills 350 Nazis who are watching a movie that kills 250 Americans. It's as if Tarantino is saying, if you've come to see a patriotic military action movie, take a look at yourself. How different are you from the audience of Pride of Nation? Everything is determined by context. In Inglourious Basterds, we're rooting for both the Americans and the Germans at the same time, depending on the situation. We worry about Shosanna when Landa practically exposes her, but then feel hatred for him when he kills her family. We admire his intelligence and cunning, but fear his ruthlessness. At the same time, we sympathize with Zoller at the beginning of the film when he tries to please Shoshana, but despise him at the end when he turns out to be as arrogant as the others. This movie is full of ambivalence. We feel pleasure in watching the Nazis being destroyed, but then realize that this joy is no different than their pleasure in watching Pride of a Nation. We see our heroes in Bastard Squad kill with cold brutality and realize that their actions are sometimes no better than those of the Nazis. Tarantino intentionally plays with the viewer's expectations. He makes us laugh in some scenes and horrified in others, sometimes alternating these emotions within a single episode. This is his way of reminding us of the duality of human nature and how thin the line is between hero and villain. And finally, in the very finale of the movie, Tarantino breaks all the traditional canons of war movies. In the world of Inglourious Basterds, the war ends not due to strategic decisions of the Allies, but because of a spontaneous act of violence committed by a guerrilla and a group of spies. Everything looks absurd, but this is the main idea of the movie. In real war, there is no nobility, no meaning, no clear boundary between good and evil. Inglourious Basterds is not only an allegory, but also a subtle meta-commentary on how we perceive war through the lens of art. Tarantino reminds us that cinema is a powerful tool that can shape our perception of history, heroes, and ourselves.